assigned to the British 30th Corps with the British 40th, no, the British 50th making a landing.
Hollywood once believed James Garner was a man without secrets. For decades, he was the embodiment of grace, a perfect gentleman both on and off the screen. No scandals, no noise, no missteps. But then, a single brief interview near the end of his life shattered that image in an instant. Garner admitted that between him and Sally Field, his co-star with whom he shared some of the sweetest moments ever captured on film, there had been a hidden romance that lasted nearly 40 years in silence. And when that story came to light, Hollywood was stunned. Because what he revealed wasn't just a secret love affair, but the painful journey of a woman who had endured deep emotional wounds, scars the world had long forgotten. Why did he choose to speak now when both had already passed their prime and no one expected a confession anymore? Was it Garner's way of finding his final peace, or a farewell to the woman he had once loved but could never protect? Let's turn back time to where it all began, under the blinding lights of a movie set where a kiss that was supposed to be just acting changed the lives of two people forever. 1. She let me be myself. James Garner said it slowly, his voice raspy and his eyes distant, as if the image of Sally Field still lingered somewhere in the blazing sunset of that summer in 1984 where everything began. That summer, the crew of Murphy's Romance set up their main location in Florence, Arizona, a small dusty town drenched in sunlight. The team stayed in rented houses scattered around town not far from the main market where locals gathered every afternoon to buy coffee and watch the filming. And in that dry air, something that wasn't supposed to happen quietly began a bond between two people who thought they had nothing left to lose. Garner was 56 at the time, already a legend. He had survived war fame and the golden years of Maverick and the Rockford Files. To everyone, he was the model of calmness and loyalty, married nearly 30 years to his devoted wife, Lois Clark. But few knew that his marriage had grown cold. Lois mostly lived in Los Angeles and rarely appeared with him on film sets. He used to joke, "She hates the desert, and I hate the silence in our house." Sally Field was different. At 38, recently married to Alan Greisman, her marriage of less than a year was already cracking. She carried emotional scars from her past and a loneliness fame couldn't erase. On the outside, she was the Oscar-winning star of Norma Ray. On the inside, a woman searching for herself. And that, Garner said, made her so real I couldn't look away. On their first day meeting, Sally arrived early on set, wearing a white cotton dress, holding a folded script and a steaming cup of black coffee. Garner was sitting on a folding chair reading a newspaper. When he saw her, he smiled softly. "Good morning, Miss Revolution." She laughed. "And you must be the charming cowboy." That simple exchange, he later said, was like an opening line to a story I didn't know would change me. The set of Murphy's Romance was near a low hill where director Martin Ritt often shot the sunset scenes. It was there one late August afternoon that the famous kiss scene was filmed. Ritt wanted it natural, unrehearsed. When he called action, Sally stepped forward, her skin glowing in the last light of day, her hair tousled by the wind. Garner in character as Murphy Jones looked at her, and at that moment, he said later, "I didn't see the cameras anymore. I only saw her." They kissed. The first take didn't please Ritt. The second lacked light. By the 11th, he was about to stop but didn't need to. They were still kissing longer than the script required. No one spoke. The whole crew froze, the hum of the camera stretching endlessly. Then Ritt smiled faintly. "Good. We got the scene. And maybe something more." In the following days, everyone noticed how close they had become. Sally brought coffee to Garner's trailer each morning. He made sure to show up before her shoots just to ask, "You okay? I heard you couldn't sleep." A makeup artist recalled that whenever Sally forgot her lines, Garner would gently hold her hand and whisper, "It's all right. Look at me." She'd look, and everything else faded. At night, the crew often gathered at the Silver Spur Diner, a small restaurant downtown. They would sit together talking for hours. One night, when the lights flickered off, Sally smiled. "Do you believe in fate?" Garner replied, "I used not to, until I met you." Then came the rumors. A People magazine reporter covering the set caught a blurry photo of Garner dropping Sally off at the El Rancho Mirado Hotel around 11 p.m. after a wrap party. The image wasn't clear, but enough to stir gossip. Around the same time, Lois Clark returned alone to Los Angeles. Neighbors said she locked herself inside for 3 weeks, speaking to no one. The Los Angeles Times wrote, "There's a closeness between them no director could script." When asked, Martin Ritt only smiled. If they fell for each other, it's because their characters were too real. Sally stayed silent. In a brief interview, when asked if she had real feelings for Garner, she said, "If I ever loved him, that was both our fault. Because we forgot the cameras were still rolling." Garner denied everything then, but years later, he admitted, "I'd never met anyone who could make me laugh and forget myself like she did. She let me be myself, not the star, not the husband, just James, a man in love." Their bond ended as quietly as it began. When filming wrapped in October 1984, they hugged on set without saying goodbye. Sally returned to Los Angeles for new projects. Garner went home to his family. But a quiet connection remained. He'd call sometimes to check on her. She sent him birthday cards every year. No one knew how many times they met again, only that years later, a photo still sat on Garner's desk, him and Sally sitting on a wooden fence in Arizona, smiling brightly under the sun. In the final recording for his unpublished memoir, Garner said, "If I'm guilty of anything, it's loving her too truthfully. But sometimes the things you're not allowed to feel are what make you feel most alive." That summer was when a weary man learned to believe in love again, and a broken woman found what safety felt like for the first time in years. And though the world saw only a kiss for them, it was the one moment when two hearts truly beat in sync. 2. The rainy night. She looked at me like, if she didn't speak, she couldn't breathe. James Garner said that during a private interview, his voice so soft the technician had to boost the volume. He was recalling a rainy night in Arizona, a night when, as he said, everything between us changed. We stopped being co-stars and became two people who saw each other's pain. It was a September evening in 1984 after a long shooting day. Rain began falling after 9 p.m., heavy and persistent, rare in the Arizona desert. Wind rattled the tarp outside his trailer, howling through the night. Most of the crew had gone home, leaving a few technicians packing up. Garner sat in his trailer wearing a dark sweater, making coffee. The knock on the door was soft, 3 cautious taps. He opened it to see Sally Field standing there, hair damp, jacket-soaked eyes glistening from rain or something else. "You're still here?" she asked with a shaky laugh. "Just cleaning up a bit." "What about you?" he replied. "I couldn't sleep." He invited her in. The trailer was dim and warm, the smell of coffee mixing with the scent of wet earth. She sat quietly, turning her cup in her hands. Garner said he could feel something heavy waiting to be said. And then she spoke. You know, she whispered some things people never forget, no matter how long they try to. Garner didn't interrupt. He just looked out the window, listening to the rain lash against the metal frame. She took a deep breath and began. She told him about being 12 years old, living with her mother and stepfather Jock Mahoney, once famous for playing Tarzan. It was another rainy night in their small Los Angeles home. Her mother was away filming. Only she and him were there. I was reading in my room. He knocked, said he needed to talk. I went out and her voice broke. He closed the door. I remember the sound of the lock. He sat on the couch, patted his knee, told me to come closer. Garner said he couldn't breathe when he heard that. He put down his cup, his hand trembling. But Field continued, eyes fixed on the empty air. When I tried to scream, he covered my mouth. I remember the smell of smoke on his hands. He said if I told my mother, she'd never be happy again. I believed him, and I stayed silent for years. The rain outside blended with the trembling in her voice. Garner quietly pulled a blanket over her shoulders. "No one deserves that," he whispered. "Especially a child." She cried, but softly. Just the sound of her breathing in the quiet. After a while, she looked up, eyes red. "Have you ever felt ashamed of something that wasn't your fault?" Garner didn't answer. He lowered his head and took her hand cold from the rain. "You did nothing wrong," he said. "Not when you were just a kid." He later said that moment changed everything. She was no longer just a cheerful co-star, but a wounded soul seeking safety. She rested her head on his shoulder, letting the tears fall. Outside, the rain poured on thunder, echoing faintly through the desert night. No one knew how long they sat like that, an hour, maybe all night, only that by morning when the crew arrived, they walked out together in silence. But their eyes were different, a crew member recalled years later. That morning, Sally looked like she'd escaped something dark. And Garner, he looked like he'd promised never to let her be hurt again. Garner admitted, "That night, I couldn't keep my distance anymore. I wanted to protect her. But when a man wants to protect someone, that means he's already fallen in love." From that night, an invisible thread bound them, woven from empathy and loneliness. They began to understand each other through glances, silences, tiny gestures. He always stood close when she filmed a hard scene. She always smiled when he looked tired. They both knew it wasn't right, but couldn't turn away. Garner said, "I used to think love made people happy. But with her, I realized real love is when you're willing to hurt with someone." And from that night, their connection, once just a spark on set, burned quietly, real deep and irreversible. 3. I remember the sound of the door locking behind me, and that was when I knew there was no going back. Garner said that when he heard Sally Field say those words, he had to stop the recording. His throat tightened. He thought he understood her pain until she told him about 1964, the year a 17-year-old girl faced the harshest test of her life. In 1964, California still prohibited certain medical procedures. Girls who found themselves in trouble, no matter the reason, were shunned by society. Sally Field, barely out of high school, was no exception. She had fallen for an older man, someone she thought would be her safe harbor. But when she told him the news, he disappeared. A classmate whispered, "In Mexico, they can help." 3 days later, Sally boarded an old bus across the border. No luggage, no company, just a small purse of cash her mother gave her without asking why. She remembered the sky over Tijuana, gray, dusty, filled with signs she couldn't read. The clinic was hidden in a dark alley behind a rusted sign that read, "Clinica Familiar." Inside, the light was dim, the air thick with disinfectant. A middle-aged woman in a stained coat asked curtly, "Do you have money?" Sally nodded. No one asked her name, no paperwork, no comfort, just a silent exchange. She was led into a small, peeling room with a metal table and a tray of cold instruments. I remember the sound of metal clinking, like in a movie, but this was real. There was no anesthesia, no kindness, just a technician with a blank face and thin gloves. When he leaned down, she shut her eyes. The rain outside mixed with the whirring of an old machine. She bit her lip until it bled to keep from crying out. And then it got worse. In her fear and pain, she felt something that shouldn't have happened. She tried to move but was held down. He said something in Spanish she didn't understand. She only knew she was powerless. I don't know when it ended. I just remember standing up, trembling so hard I couldn't zip my dress. When she stepped outside, it was night. No one spoke to her, no instructions, just a crumpled paper bill scribbled in pencil. She walked into the rain, her shoes heavy with mud, her tears lost in the downpour. On the bus back to California, she sat in the back row. The diesel smell was thick. Every bump on the road sent pain through her body. She looked out the window, the city lights fading behind, and in that moment she knew her 17th year was gone forever. She never told anyone. Not her mother, not friends. For years, every sound of metal made her heart race. In her memoir, In Pieces 2018, she wrote, "I lived like a ghost, pretending to be happy, pretending to be strong, thinking silence would make it disappear. But silence never erases memory. It only seals the scar deeper. It followed her throughout her career. In early film sets, she kept her distance. When reporters asked why she rarely smiled backstage, she said simply, "I'm still learning how to be happy." When Sally shared this with Garner, he stayed silent a long time. That night, he just listened to no questions, no interruptions. When she finished, he said something she would never forget. "You don't need to apologize for surviving." And in that moment, Garner understood her better than anyone ever had, that behind her warmth, intelligence, and strength was a soul torn apart long ago. A woman who had walked through darkness just to be able to smile again before a camera. Later, Field wrote in her book, "If I stayed silent, I'd be complicit in my own past." And in his final notes, Garner wrote a single line. "About that night, I saw her real scar. Not on her skin, but in her eyes where pain, shame, and courage lived together. That was why, for the rest of his life, he cherished her not as a lover, but as a survivor of the cruelest things life could do." 4. She wasn't afraid of the dark. She was afraid that when the lights went out, no one would listen. James Garner said that in a 2010 interview when he was asked what he remembered most about Sally Field. He didn't talk about the kisses, didn't mention the forbidden bond, he spoke only about the quiet, which in his words was where she lived for years after the lights went out. In the 1970s, as Sally Field's career was reaching its peak, she won her first Oscar for Norma Rae, 1979, a role that lifted her from TV star to emblem of women's strength. But behind the applause at the Dolby Theater was a woman falling apart day by day. She said in an interview with Vulture, "I couldn't sleep for months. I was afraid to open the door, afraid to go out, afraid of being asked, 'Are you happy?' because I didn't know how to answer." She felt as if she were living in someone else's body, performing the role of Sally Field in public while inside was a cold, empty space. An old friend told people Sally wasn't fighting Hollywood. She was fighting herself. Garner by then was quietly watching from afar. They were in touch rarely, but he knew. At an American Film Institute event, 1983, he noticed her eyes had changed. There wasn't any light in them anymore, only weariness. He walked over, touched her shoulder lightly, and said, "Don't let them take you away from yourself." She just smiled a smile he later described as beautiful, but aching with sadness. Time passed, and fame kept pushing Sally higher. But the higher she climbed, the lonelier she felt. In 1985, Murphy's Romance, the film that made Hollywood believe she had found her smile again, was in truth only a perfect mask. Inside, she was still the woman who had been hurt, struggling to believe she deserved to be loved. In the 1990s, after her divorce, she began therapy. She wrote in her memoir, "I used to sit in a room with only the dark and a mirror. I stared into it for hours trying to find who I was, but saw nothing except a frightened look." In her 60s, with silver threading her hair, Sally Field chose a new path to speak openly. No longer hiding, she shared her past, from early harms to a difficult youthful decision to the deep lows she had survived. In 2024, at a talk in California about women's reproductive rights, she recounted the story of that decision at 17. Her voice trembled, but her gaze was steady. "I'm not speaking to be pitied. I'm speaking because there are girls staying silent like I once did." The Guardian ran a piece the next day, calling her words a brave yet contentious testimony. Some praised her as a symbol of courage, while others criticized her for turning private pain into politics. TV shows debated it for weeks, but Sally didn't respond. She posted a single line on social media: "Silence has never protected anyone." James Garner passed away in 2014, but every time his name comes up, Sally's voice softens. In a 2015 tribute interview on CBS, asked what he meant to her, Sally said one sentence that left the host silent for a few seconds. "James was the first person who made me believe I deserved to be heard." To her, he wasn't just a co-star, but someone who saw the real self. The world had missed the fragile, wounded part that still wanted to be loved. In Garner's later years, friends said there was always an old photo in a silver frame in his Brentwood study, he and Sally sitting on a wooden fence in the Arizona desert, beaming after the final scene of Murphy's Romance. On the back, he wrote by hand, "For Sally, the only woman who made silence sound beautiful. Gui Sally, ngoi funu dui nhat kiensu im lang tro nenjepje." Perhaps it was more than a film memory. It was proof of a true feeling, a connection that outlasted scandal, time, and fame. A feeling born under bright lights, but most alive after the lights went out. Not every love is written into a script. Some loves exist only between two hearts, and a vow to keep quiet. James Garner finally broke that quiet, not to reopen the past, but to give it its truest shape, a story both gentle and tragic, where the lights had gone dark, but the echo remained. He spoke not to clear his name, not to seek sympathy, but to help the world understand that behind every Hollywood smile there may be a heart quietly fractured by real love. And for Sally Field, perhaps Garner never really left. He is still there in memory, in old letters, in that photo of the two of them in the Arizona desert, smiling brightly after the last scene. A love with no name, no ending, no promises, only the lingering echo of truth, the very thing James Garner carried with him to the end. If you also believe true stories are always stronger than what we see on screen, leave a comment below. What do you think about this bond? Is it a mistake or destiny? Don't forget to like and share the video so more people can hear this moving story, and follow the channel to explore untold secrets behind Hollywood legends with me.